All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jenny, for meeting with me today. I'd love to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my name is Jenny Lockwald-Stewart, and I kind of do two things right now. I'm part-time an executive coach and do consulting for career development, that type of thing. But my other three-quarter time job is I'm actually an executive director of a nonprofit, of a foundation that offers scholarships both to undergraduate and seminary students.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. And I love hearing about that. So when you work with people in career paths, what is that? What do you kind of do? You go in and help them, find the right organization to get involved with or work on skills?
Um, a lot of times what I'm doing, it turns out, is I usually get recruited to help somebody who is at a point in life that one of two or three things is happening. One, it may be that they've excelled in business and they're an executive, but they've kind of gotten into this thing where they kind of start seeing the same things popping up on their negative type things on their reviews. And so I've been recruited by individuals and by companies to say, hey, can you come in and help me figure this out? Right. And so what's interesting about that for me is that a lot of times I end up dealing with a lot of teaching what emotional intelligence is and change management around that with an executive. Another thing that I might get called in for is sometimes a shift in life, right? So it could be, I have a particular client that was deciding whether or not they wanted to switch jobs. Like they'd been at the same job for 20 years and had been incredibly successful, but then kind of had this life event happen that was difficult for them. And ultimately, we started off kind of talking about whether or not they were going to go back to the company they've been with or should they go somewhere else. And so I spend a lot of time talking with people about understanding their own personal values, what's important to them, kind of helping them figure out what is most important to them, and then how does that apply in their career? And how does that look in their career? So I've done team building, individual coaching, but that is usually I'm called in at a point where it's like, I feel stuck and I don't know how to move something forward. That could be business, that could be personal. It could be as a leader, right? I'm even doing a little bit of coaching with some kids who've just gotten out of college and are kind of going, I got this degree and I don't know what to do next. So that's, it's oftentimes word of mouth, but that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds so exciting. And I feel like there's so many of us that could benefit from that kind of coach. So I love it. I feel like it's much needed. So yeah. I'd love to just kind of like jump in and, and figure out, kind of just hear a little bit from you of like how long you have been serving with Join the Journey and what it's like to be a part of the organization.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I was actually recruited by Join the Journey back in October of 2020. So just a few months ago, but I was recruited because of my coaching side. And so when I first heard from them and got some information, I was like, well, this is really interesting to me. And the reason it was so interesting is I do have to go back in my history just a little bit. I worked at World Vision for 12 years. And if people aren't familiar with World Vision, they're a global humanitarian organization. And I've actually been to Zambia. Oh my gosh, the last year I was at World Vision, I went 3 times. I think I've actually been there 4 times, but I had been there, met people there, right? Kind of learned the situation of those who, don't have the same opportunity financially, or they live outside the city, right? They're more rural and they have needs. And the interesting thing to me has always been, it's not that they need us to solve all their problems for them. It's that typically they need a hand up, right? They just need a little bit of help to get a hand up and to build their own businesses. We as Americans, I think sometimes think, oh, we've come to solve the problem. And it's not necessarily solving the problem. It's coming alongside them to understand their unique problems and then helping them with that, right? Providing creative, ideas, because especially if you're in rural Zambia, what you're dealing with as a small business or someone who's just trying to make it is so different from the way that we live in a westernized culture. That's not just America, but any Western culture is very different than what a developing country is doing. And so having worked with World Vision, when I left there, even my consulting work for the most part has been with a lot of nonprofits. I just have a heart for that. And so when I got the invitation to potentially be a coach, that's how it started with Join the Journey and these entrepreneurs in Zambia, I was immediately like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I think part of what happened for me is realizing that volunteering with Join the Journey kind of filled a gap that I had after leaving World Vision. Like, I love that I've been helping various types of nonprofits, across the country and consulting. Some are humanitarian, some are, more. I have one I've worked with that was focused on raising money for cancer, but they do it in a very unique way, right? So I've been doing all of that, but Join the Journey for me really hit my heart and going, here's a great way for me to use my skills and my passion and then help people in a developing country outside of the people I help here. It just kind of filled a gap I don't even think I realized was there until I started doing it. And as I've said to the executive director, Adam, this is like a passion project for me. I love what I do, and I help in my nonprofit. We help a lot of first-gen students and underserved students, and sometimes I'm dealing with students from other countries, but this was a way for me to go, oh, my heart for helping people figure out how to be successful, whether that's in business or what it is they're passionate about in life, it just speaks to the core of who I am and why I like to give back.
Yeah, I love that. And it was such a great answer. And it kind of definitely leads me into, our impact and where you can see, teaming up with Join the Journey and yourself and the tons of experience you have. What kind of impact do you think that we can make in the next coming months, years of sticking on this track and helping people out with their, entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. Well, there's two things I want to say related to that and answering that question. I think that there's two sides to the way we help people. And one of those sides is helping those of us who are actually coaching and those on the other side that are getting the coaching, right? It's really interesting because I think sometimes we approach things from our perspective of business and the way that we do business in this culture, right? And what's been interesting to me is to actually, when we stop and we listen to the needs of these entrepreneurs, it's very different. So a great example is a lot of these people don't have storefronts. They might rent some space in a market, or they work alongside a road in a very public area where people are coming and going every day, or they go door to door, or they're working out of their house, right? And there was one gentleman that during one of the coaching sessions said, that he basically has a bicycle, right? This is how he does his work. He has a bicycle and he loads his little products. They're like cooking and kitchen plastic type products. He puts them on his bike, and then he goes door to door in the community to sell. And then it was rainy season while we were talking to him. So I asked the question, what do you do during rainy season? Right? We have cars, we hop in the car, that kind of thing. He's like, I just put my boots on and then I walk and go door to door. Right? So it's interesting to think about over the next few months. I think what's helpful is, as people in business that are doing coaching with these entrepreneurs, we have to stop and listen, and we're challenged to take what we know and think about how to apply it in a very unique way for these people, because they're not working in necessarily the same situation we are. So I think again, that's why I go back to, it's very two-sided to me. I think there's a learning curve on our side, and then it's for us to help them. I had one gentleman, one of the first sessions I did, there was an older gentleman who's had a business for like 20 years. And he said, you know, I wanted to hear more from them. So he came forward to say, okay, here's one of the problems I'm dealing with. And he said, I'm dealing with the fact that I go through employees very quickly because they really don't have employee contracts, and the employee has kind of learned something. And then if they find they can make more money somewhere else, they're going to leave. And so they lose employees. And so, you know, it's one of those things where, again, not typical of the things we deal with here in the United States or in a Western type culture, but in their world, these are people who they just want to make enough to feed their families, right? And keep going. And that may sound similar to us, but when you think about it, like, I want to say it's something like these entrepreneurs need, in their terms, they need something like, what is it? 2000 or, oh, I'd have to go back and look, whatever their kwacha, that's their money. Mm-hmm. So whatever their kwacha amount is to us is like for $1 in the US is like 200 kwacha or something, right? Like, so they're literally trying to make enough of kwacha just to feed the family or keep, and they have to pay for their kids to go to school, right? And so they're losing employees. And when they lose employees, now they have to start all over again. So in having that conversation, I just kind of sat back and I said, let me think about this for a second, right? Like, I don't have all the answers right away, but I said, okay, let me ask you a question. Could you do an arrangement with your employees where if they decide to leave, that they give you, like, that one of your requirements, like if you made it a requirement, they have to give you 2 weeks notice, kind of like we do here, right? But within that 2 weeks that they actually help you train before they leave, they're going to help train the next person, because that wasn't happening, right? So it's kind of taking a situation of how we deal with things here and then thinking, okay, how can we apply it there? And then you have to think about, I don't know their rules, their HR, like, do they even have HR rules like we do? You know, so you have to think about those things and then offer advice that says, okay, would this work in your environment, within your community? Will it work within the rules and the laws of your government and what is required of you? So I think as we move down the road, what we're going to see is that we're able to bring unique thought and ideas for dealing with problems. But I think on our side, it challenges us as leaders and business owners to actually think about new ways to use our knowledge to help them lift up in their situation, again, which I know I keep saying this, but it is so unique to the way that we move, we move and do business here in the United States.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's a really good call out that you brought up of, like, we have experience here, but we really need to meet anybody where they're at and find out what their why is, because we have our own why of what's driving us here and in our businesses. And we really need to figure out what theirs is as well, because it's going to be completely different than ours, just like yours and mine are. Right.
Right.
So I feel like that's an exceptional call out.
Yeah. It's interesting, again, to be involved because they don't necessarily have internet. It's really hard for some of them. Some of them are on Facebook. Some of them aren't. Some have internet. Some can get to the internet cafe. But what's really interesting is most of them have cell phones. And I know that's an odd thing to think about, is here these people, they have cell phones, but that's actually something the cell phone companies do in developing countries, is go in and try to, like, offer deals on phones so they can build towers and put up cell phone towers. But they still struggle with things like internet, and they don't do things like, well, do you have a website? No, they don't have a web. They don't even have they're working out of their home, and they, we're hoping they have electricity, sometimes, but they do have their cell phone. So it's really interesting to look at, again, how do we do things and how would we apply our, like you said, our why, right? When you sit down with somebody, you're trying to help them. Like I told you in the beginning, for me, I'm usually working with people to say, okay, what do you value? What's important to you? What style of communication do you like? What is not working in the way you communicate with the way other people communicate, that you may be struggling with in business? But taking all of that and then going, okay, how do I make that in a very simplistic way sometimes make sense in a country where they're still not doing everything the way that we do it? The majority of people that Join the Journey serves are women. And one of the things we know about women, especially in third world countries, developing countries, the more you empower women, the more that you help them build their business, the more they invest back into their own children, into their community, and they're more likely to pay their loans back than men. And that's not to be disparaging about men, but it is true that as you empower women within these communities, then you're going to see that community lift up. And when you lift up those women, you're lifting up, in a sense, all boats, because you're lifting up the community. You're empowering their children for a better future, which then empowers the city and empowers the country. And actually, from even that little bit, creates global impact.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that's great. And yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of times when we go into situations like this, we're like, this is how I do it. So this is how you should do it. And, you know, we even do that in the United States among one another, but it's really just so important for us to just, you know, create opportunities like this where we can support other communities within, you know, from our organization, but where they need it and not where we anticipate that they need it. I do really appreciate, you know, your time and, you know, sharing your story with our community. Is there anything that you want to, you know, leave with that we need to know about you?
I would just say, you know, part of what Join the Journey is all about is an example or an expression of our faith, right? And so I just want to say that, you know, I've had the honor of working in multiple faith-based organizations. And so it is a joy for me to be involved with other people of faith who are giving back of themselves. I also had the honor of, after working as a coach and being involved and just kind of getting in there and listening to what was happening, I was invited to be on the board, and I accepted that honor and that commitment. Now I'm hoping I live up to that commitment, but it is a way for me to, while I do other things in business and I get paid for it, Join the Journey for me is the place that I'm able to give back and I'm able to serve others as a part of my faith. You know, I've always been a fan of the what's been accredited to St. Francis, and it's this saying, you know, preach the gospel, when necessary, use words. The thing about that, I've done a little bit more research on it, is that it wasn't about not talking about our faith. The way that it was written and the way that St. Francis meant that is that our actions should match up to our words. And so this is another way for me in my own actions to live out the faith I truly believe in. And I think the beauty of service to others that Christ calls us to.
Yeah, definitely. Gave me goosebumps. Such a powerful share, and I really appreciate it. And as a part of the organization, I definitely want to thank you for your commitment and contribution, because we are here to serve, and we can't do it without people like you. So we really do appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored, truly.